Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in each of our lives when the noise around us grows louder than the voice within us. We're taught to wear masks, to meet expectations, to fit into roles that never quite feel like home. But what if I told you the greatest freedom, the deepest strength, and the most unshakable peace you'll ever find begins the moment you dare to live your truth? Tonight, I want to speak to the hearts that have been silenced, the souls that have been stretched thin, and the spirits who are ready to rise, not through ego, not through force, but through the quiet, unshakable power of authenticity. So lean in, not just with your ears, but with your heart, because this isn't just a message, it's a mirror. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see the brave, beautiful truth you've been carrying all along. When someone thrives on chaos, unpredictability, and emotional reaction, nothing frustrates them more than a calm spirit. Chaos is their language, but peace is the language they can't understand. It's like trying to start a fire in the middle of a rainstorm. It just won't catch. People who seek control, like narcissists, often look for emotional triggers. They push buttons to see what will make you break. Anger, frustration, tears, confusion. These are the reactions they expect. Why? Because when you react, they feel powerful. They feel like they've successfully gotten inside your head and claimed space in your heart. But when you stop reacting and start responding with calm, it changes everything. Peace becomes your armor. It protects your energy, guards your mind, and speaks for you in a way no argument ever could. You're not giving them what they want. You're not stepping into their chaos. You're creating your own atmosphere. And that's power. Peace isn't passivity. It's not weakness. It's not about staying quiet because you're afraid. It's choosing not to allow someone else's storm to affect your sky. It's having every right to explode, but choosing not to. That choice is strength. It's emotional intelligence. It's maturity. And most importantly, it's freedom. This peace doesn't come from ignoring reality. It comes from facing it with confidence. It says, I know who I am. I know what I deserve. I know I don't have to play this game. And that quiet certainty is like holding a mirror up to someone who thrives on insecurity. They can't stand it. Because in your stillness, they're forced to face their own instability. Maintaining peace in the presence of chaos also sets a boundary without words. It's that you can bring your noise, but it won't live here. That silent message is louder than any confrontation, and over time, it trains people in how to treat you. When you walk into a room where tension is high and people are on edge, the person who maintains their peace is the one who stands out. They don't need to raise their voice. They don't need to defend themselves or prove anything. Their presence alone creates a shift in the atmosphere. Staying grounded in peace also gives you clarity. In the middle of emotional chaos, decisions made in anger or fear are rarely wise, but peace clears the fog. It gives you space to think, to breathe, and to see things as they are, not through the lens of panic or pain, but through wisdom. Either they rise to your level of calm, or they remove themselves altogether. And yes, it's hard, especially for empaths who feel everything so deeply. It takes practice. It takes moments of biting your tongue, breathing deeply, and walking away when your emotions beg you to stay and fight. But every time you choose peace, you build resilience. You become emotionally unshakable. It's not about ignoring disrespect or letting people walk over you. It's about choosing the battlefield wisely. It's about knowing that some wars are won by standing still while the enemy exhausts themselves swinging in the air. Peace isn't the absence of struggle. It's the presence of power. Your power. The kind that doesn't need to be loud to be heard. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. And once you realize that, you become unstoppable. There comes a moment when you realize that protecting your peace is more important than pleasing people. And that moment often begins with a single word, no. Not an angry no, not a defensive no, just a calm, confident, unapologetic. No, that's a boundary. And it doesn't need a PowerPoint presentation to go with it. Empath and kind-hearted souls often struggle with this. They feel the need to explain everything, to soften the blow, to avoid being misunderstood, to justify why they can give more. But here's the truth. Boundaries are not up for debate. They are not a question. They are not a compromise. They are a decision, a personal line drawn out of self-respect, not selfishness. When someone asks you for more than you can give or crosses the line you've drawn, the most powerful response isn't a long explanation. It's consistency. It's standing firm in your decision without guilt, without apology, and without over-talking. Because the moment you begin explaining your boundaries, you open the door for negotiation. And not everyone has good intentions when they walk through that door. Those who respect you won't need a long explanation. They'll understand that your no is coming from a place of love for yourself. You're doing it because you've learned what drains you, what disrespects you, what makes you feel small, and you're simply choosing not to accept that anymore. That decision is sacred. It's personal. It doesn't need to be approved by anyone else. You're allowed to say no to toxic energy. You're allowed to walk away from conversations that go nowhere. You're allowed to not answer that call, not return that message, not show up when your soul feels heavy. And you don't have to explain why. You don't owe anyone access to you just because they demand it. When your spirit becomes tired from being everything to everyone, boundaries become the breath of fresh air you've been gasping for. And once you taste that freedom, you'll never go back to over-explaining why you need it. Manipulation thrives on reaction. It feeds off emotional responses, whether it's anger, guilt, confusion, or fear. When someone tries to control or deceive you, they're often testing how far they can go by watching how you respond. They speak in circles, twist your words, push your buttons, and wait for you to either defend yourself, break down, or give in. Some will say you've changed. Some might get angry, distance themselves, or try to make you feel bad. Let them, because if someone only accepts you when you're available, agreeable, and self-sacrificing, then what they love isn't you. It's their control over you. You are not responsible for how others respond to your boundaries. You are only responsible for protecting your peace. And sometimes the strongest thing you can say is not yes, not I'll try, not let me explain, but simply this doesn't work for me and leave it at that. But those who don't respect your boundaries will always want reasons, not because they're trying to understand, but because they're looking for weak spots. They want to poke holes in your decision. They want to twist your words. They want to guilt you into bending. That's why silence or a firm sentence with no room for back and forth is so powerful. Setting boundaries without explaining yourself also teaches people something deeper, that your value is not tied to their approval. You're not setting a boundary to hurt them, to punish them, or to manipulate them. There's a quiet kind of power in saying no with a smile, in declining an invitation without guilt, in backing out of an unhealthy dynamic without a dramatic exit. That kind of strength can only come from knowing your worth, not just saying you're worthy, but living like you are. When you set boundaries, you're not being cold, you're being clear. And clarity protects everyone. It creates space where respect can grow. It tells others how to treat you. And more importantly, it tells you that you matter. It's not your job to make others comfortable with your growth. Some people will misunderstand you. That's the game. And silence breaks the rules. Silence disrupts manipulation in a way that nothing else can. When you stop reacting, you shift the dynamic. Suddenly, the manipulator doesn't know where you stand. They can't tell if you're hurt, angry, or unaffected. And that uncertainty strips them of their power. They want to provoke you into explaining, arguing, or doubting yourself. But when you respond with nothing, just calm, still presence, they lose their grip. It takes strength to stay silent, especially when you're being misunderstood, blamed, or baited into a fight. Everything inside of you may want to speak up, to clarify, to prove your point. But the moment you start explaining, you risk falling into that trap, because manipulation doesn't play fair. It doesn't look for truth. It looks for leverage. Sometimes silence is not a lack of words. It's a loud declaration of self-respect. He says, I'm not engaging with this energy. He says, your tactics don't work here anymore. And for someone who's used to getting a reaction out of you, that silence can be maddening, but it's also clarifying. It reveals who they are without you having to say a word. Silence also gives you time to see clearly. When emotions are high and the situation feels foggy, silence becomes a space to breathe. In that pause, you begin to notice patterns. You start to hear what's really being said beneath the surface. You begin to separate truth from distortion, and from that clarity, you can make stronger decisions. In conversations where control is the motive, every word you speak can be used against you. A manipulator may pretend to care, ask questions they don't really want answers to, or pretend to be the victim. When you remain quiet, you keep your power. You stop giving them material to twist. You deny them the fuel they need to keep the fire going. This doesn't mean you become passive or submissive. It means you become intentional. Sometimes silence is the first move before walking away. Manipulation is noisy. It demands attention. It needs your energy to survive. But silence is sacred. It's controlled. It's intentional. It puts space between you and the chaos. And in that space, clarity grows, strength builds, and the game ends. Compassion is often seen as something you give, something you pour out for others when they're hurting, struggling, or lost. It's the warm embrace, the gentle word, the quiet understanding that says, I see you and I care. And while that is beautiful, it becomes incomplete, sometimes even dangerous, when it doesn't include you. Sometimes it's the way you hold your boundaries. Sometimes it's the space you give yourself to protect your peace. Either way, silence becomes your strategy. Not because you're afraid to speak, but because you're wise enough to know when not to. There's also something deeply unsettling to a manipulative person when they realize they can no longer control your emotions. Maybe once you used to cry, argue, or beg, but now you're calm. You're still. You see them for who they are, and you're no longer emotionally available for the drama. You also get tired. You also have wounds that need tending, limits that deserve to be honored, and a heart that requires care. When you start treating yourself with the same tenderness you give to others, something shifts. You no longer feel drained after helping someone. You no longer feel like kindness comes at the cost of your well-being. Self-compassion looks like saying no when you're overwhelmed, even if someone is disappointed. It's giving yourself grace when you make a mistake, instead of beating yourself up with shame. Many people who are naturally compassionate know how to love others deeply. They know how to sit with someone's pain, carry burdens, and be a source of light. But somewhere along the way, they forget, or were never taught, that they deserve that same kind of love. They were praised for being selfless, admired for always being there, and maybe even made to feel guilty for thinking about their own needs. So compassion became a one-way street. And that's where the damage begins. You can't keep pouring from a cup that's empty. It's stepping away from toxic relationships, not because you don't care, but because you do, and that care must start with you. It's realizing that you don't have to earn rest, love, or kindness. You deserve those things simply because you exist. The truth is, some people will take your compassion and run with it, not because they're evil, but because they're used to getting what they want. And if you're always willing to give, they'll never stop taking. But when you begin to include yourself in that equation, you start to recognize the imbalance. When your compassion is always outward and never inward, it starts to cost you. You begin to ignore your own exhaustion. You silence your needs. You stay in situations that hurt, thinking it's the kind thing to do. You give second, third, and 10th chances to people who consistently take but rarely give. And each time you do, a piece of you gets chipped away, not because you're weak, but because you've forgotten that you matter too. Including yourself in your compassion doesn't make you selfish, it makes you whole. It's recognizing that you are also human. You begin to see who respects your boundaries and who only stays around when they benefit. And though that realization may hurt, it sets you free. Self-compassion also changes the way you speak to yourself. It softens the voice in your head that says you're not good enough, not doing enough, not strong enough. It reminds you that you're doing the best you can, that growth takes time, and that you're allowed to be a work in progress. That kind of inner kindness becomes a source of strength, not weakness. It gives you resilience in moments when life feels heavy. And you treat yourself with compassion. You become a better version of yourself for others too. Not because you're giving more, but because you're giving from a place of wholeness, not depletion. People can feel the difference. Your energy becomes grounded. Your yes means something because it's not forced. Your presence becomes a gift, not a burden you carry on your shoulders. True compassion doesn't require you to sacrifice your soul. It invites you to hold space for both others and yourself, to listen, to love, to support, and to rest. It teaches you that your needs are not inconvenient. Your boundaries are not rude. Your rest is not laziness. They are all a part of what makes you fully alive. And that kind of life, the one where compassion flows in both directions, is where healing begins. Living your truth is one of the most courageous things a person can do. It doesn't require a stage, a spotlight, or applause. It simply asks that you be who you truly are, fully, consistently, and unapologetically. And in a world that often rewards masks, this kind of authenticity becomes a quiet form of rebellion. It challenges everything that is built on illusion, including ego. That transformation speaks volumes, and it often speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. Silence isn't about avoiding the truth. It's about waiting for the right moment to speak it, if it even needs to be spoken at all. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing and let your actions, your peace, and your detachment do the talking. Because when someone can't get a rise out of you, they're forced to sit in their own behavior, and that can be more confronting than any words you could say. Ego wants to control perception. It thrives on image, comparison, and approval. It carefully crafts how it wants to be seen and does everything it can to protect that version of itself. But truth doesn't play that game. Truth doesn't perform. It just is. And when someone chooses to live in their truth without pretending or pleasing, it exposes the ego for what it is, fragile and afraid. People who operate from ego often feel threatened by authenticity. They can't manipulate what's real. They can't twist it or reshape it to suit their agenda. So when someone walks in their truth, grounded and honest, it makes ego uncomfortable. It's not because that person is attacking anyone. It's simply because they're standing in something unshakable, something ego cannot replicate. Living your truth means owning your story, your past, your pain, your growth, your voice. It means not hiding parts of yourself to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. It means speaking when silence feels easier and staying silent when noise is expected. It means showing up as yourself, even when that self is still healing, still learning, still becoming. Because the truth is not a destination, it's a daily decision. And every time you choose it, something false falls away. Every time you speak from it, something fake loses its power. That's how truth dismantles ego, not with aggression, not with pride, but with quiet, consistent, undeniable presence. So if you've ever felt like your quiet strength wasn't enough, if you've ever questioned your worth because you weren't loud, controlling, or constantly proving yourself, it means making choices that align with your values, even if those choices aren't popular. When you live your truth, you don't have to prove anything. You don't have to chase validation or seek constant reassurance. You don't fear being misunderstood because your worth isn't tied to being liked. That kind of self-possession is powerful, and it shakes the foundation of ego-driven environments. It creates discomfort for those who are still performing, still hiding, still pretending. Truth doesn't argue, it doesn't try to dominate, it just exists. And in doing so, it holds up a mirror. It takes humility. But on the other side of that process is freedom. There is no peace like the peace of no longer pretending. When you stop editing yourself to meet someone else's expectations, you start to breathe differently. You stop apologizing for your existence. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. And ironically, it's in that space when you're just being you, that you become most magnetic, most inspiring, and most untouchable. Ego can build empires, but truth builds legacies. Ego can win arguments, but truth wins hearts. Let me remind you, your truth is your power, not the version of you shaped by pressure, fear, or performance, but the real you, the one who loves deeply, the one who sees clearly, the one who's learning to choose peace over chaos, boundaries over burnout, and healing over hiding. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight to be seen. Your presence, your honesty, your heart, it already speaks volume. Keep living your truth, even if your voice shakes. Keep showing up, even when it's hard. Because in a world full of noise, your authenticity is a rare and radiant gift. Thank you for having the courage to be real, and thank you for listening.